Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Ashtaprayeshu Bhantreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistike. So continuing with the discussion on Prabhupada Lilamrita by Srila Goswami. Chapter 44th, Prabhupada is in Frankfurt, June 18th, 1974. When Srila Prabhupada arrived, Hansadutta and a large group of devotees accompanied him in a procession of 20 cars and vans to the outskirts of the city to the ISKCON center. Schloss Rettershop, a castle on a hill. My heart becomes engladdened when I hear a mridanga in a German village, Srila Prabhupada said. The devotees showed Prabhupada the Schloss. The center room was a large ground floor hall with the ceiling 2 stories high. A second floor gallery overlooking the hall led to Prabhupada's quarters. While Srila Prabhupada was in his room, the assembled devotees from centers all over Germany and from Amsterdam gathered downstairs, where they held a wildly enthusiastic kirtan. After half an hour, Hansadutta appeared at the railing and motioned to the devotees to come up to Prabhupada's room. Some of the devotees managed to squeeze into Prabhupada's quarters, or at least stand in the hallway and watch, as Prabhupada sat relaxed, speaking informally. I worked hard my whole life, he said. I never liked to sit idle. So devotional service means to be always engaged in Krishna's service. Not like the servants in Calcutta. They get an order and then they go to Dalhousie Park and sleep all day. Then when they come back late, the master asks them, where have you been all day? And they reply, I was busy working for you. Not like that, you see. So not like the servants in Calcutta means servants of household, even the government employees, they do that. They just get some work and they go to Dalhousie Park and sleep all day. And they come back in the evening, whether they got work done or not doesn't matter. Prabhupada laughed, and all the devotees also began laughing, although most of them understood very little English because they were German. Prabhupada then quoted Lord Chaitanya's prophecy that his name would be heard in every town and village. The devotees chanting in the villages of Germany, he said, was fulfilling that prediction. But unfortunately, he added, people object just like the man who's being saved from danger. He gave the example of a man on a roof flying a kite. When another man, seeing him about to walk off the roof, called out to him, look out, you are in danger. The man on the roof became angry and said, well, you have checked my movement. Any gentleman, Prabhupada said, will speak out if he sees another in danger, even though the one in danger may object. So this is what preachers do. They're telling people that you are in danger. Danger in the sense, you're wasting your human life. But people, they just object, they just get offended. Well, that's where the preaching intelligence comes in, how we need to preach to people without getting them offended. Proper German devotees accompanied him on speaking engagements in nearby towns, and although he was not very enthusiastically received by most people, the devotees became more dedicated than ever to give their lives in the service of Prabhupada and Krishna. For his public engagement, he sat on a small cushion so as not to again rouse indignation of people who could not understand the tradition of the Guru. At one engagement, a wealthy businessman, 2 of whose sons were Prabhupada's disciples, questioned Prabhupada, how can a crocodile of the Nile swim in a German river? In other words, how can you transplant a foreign culture with Indian ways and dress to Germany? Prabhupada said, you can become Krishna conscious in a tie and suit. Prabhupada replied, isn't this chanting self-hypnosis? Asked another man. No, Prabhupada replied staunchly, it is purification. And so it went, mostly challenges with a few sincere inquiries. While Prabhupada was in Frankfurt, 2 interested, distinguished visitors came to see him. A Benedictine monk, Father Emmanuel, and Baron von Durkheim. a prominent German philosopher and spiritual writer. Both men were attracted by Prabhupada's philosophical explanations and accompanied him on his morning walks for several days. Srila Prabhupada's next stop was Australia. So from Germany to Australia, all the way to Australia. He had worked out a schedule nearby, whereby he would attend 3 Rath Yatra festivals in 3 cities. First in Melbourne, then a week later in Chicago, from Australia to Chicago, and 2 days later in San Francisco. He would then go to Los Angeles, Dallas, and New Vrindavan, timing everything for his return to Vrindavan by July 25th for the Krishna Balram Mandir opening 2 weeks later. What about jet lag? What about fatigue? Didn't matter to Prabhupada. He was now regularly referring to the opening date of Krishna Balram Mandir as a time when many devotees from around the world would gather at Vrindavan to be with him. On June 17th, he had returned from Germany to Jayahari in London. I'm presently traveling through Europe, and in the past weeks I've held many programs in Rome, Geneva, Paris, and now Germany. I therefore have no time to carefully study and decide on the proposals. The best thing is, if you can come and meet with me personally after I finish this present tour. I'm planning to go to Vrindavan for Janmashtami, for the opening installation ceremonies of our Krishna Balram temple. If you can come to see me in Vrindavan, I would be glad to discuss and plan with you what is best for your devotional service engagement. After a 20-hour flight from Frankfurt to Australia, Prabhupada was picked up at the Melbourne airport by devotees in a borrowed Rolls-Royce. The newspaper reporters were quick to notice a car, Divine Grace comes rolling in. Read one headline. The story began. 60 young Hare Krishna devotees yesterday welcomed their earthly leader to the city with obeisances, but official Melbourne met him coolly. Another story began. A chauffeur-driven Rolls-Royce will meet the founder of the materialistic shunning Hare Krishna sect, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, at Tullamarine today. Another newspaper showed a large picture of Srila Prabhupada smiling and bore the headlines. His Divine Grace is here to hound us. The story began. His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the founder of the Hare Krishna movement, is here to save us from the dog's life. Unless we cultivate some spiritual knowledge, once His Divine Grace, we are left with the dog's mentality. News coverage of Prabhupada's visit didn't end with reports on his arrival at the airport. The next day, while the devotees were preparing the Rath Yatra cards, an extraordinary incident resulted in the front page headlines in the Herald. Krishna sect uses canopy to save women from blazing office. Monks from the Hare Krishna sect held the painted canvas canopy of the religious wagon as a safety net, so 5 screaming women could jump to safety from a blazing 3-story building in Melbourne yesterday. The article was accompanied by 2 large pictures showing Hare Krishnas holding the large canvas canopy. Although the news media was unable to understand the disciples' love for Srila Prabhupada, the rescue was something everyone could relate to, wrote a columnist in the Australian. The fact that makes the rescue doubly impressive was the use of a holy rug, not just an ordinary bedroom one, for the rescue mission. The rug was being sewn for use at a religious festival in Melbourne tomorrow. So probably looks like there was some fire and the ladies were up in the building and they jumped and devotees caught them with the canopy cloth of Lord Jagannath's chariot. The columnist coyly speculated whether the devotee's holy rug was still usable in the religious festival as a canopy for His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. You see, the Swami is not one of the ordinary Swamis. He is founder of the Hare Krishna. The group describes him as the Lord of the universe. Devotee spokesman had reported, however, that the rug would be used in the festival. The incident proved to be good publicity for the festival. The next day, when Lord Jagannath, the Lord of the universe, and his pure devotee, Srila Prabhupada, held a Rath Yatra procession through the main streets of Melbourne. Regarding media coverage, Prabhupada had said that simply the printing of the holy names, Hare Krishna, greatly benefited the readers, regardless of whether the names are mentioned in reverence or disrespect. So they printed Hare Krishna in the papers and readers read it. That they made tremendous progress. In fact, this is what Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj used to say. When he would print an article, either he or anybody was written an article, he would count in that article how many times the word Krishna is mentioned. And if it is lots of times, then he would say, yes, it is, it's approved. Because people, whether they understand the philosophy or not, they will read Krishna. That's how then the bhakti begins. Make tremendous progress. And that is one of the reasons people in the earlier days, they used to name their children after names of Krishna or Govinda or whatever names. So anybody who reads, anybody who says that name will get benefit. Amoga. Prabhupada met Lord Jagannath at City Square by Town Hall. There was a Vyasasana on the cart, but he chose to walk before the carts, in front of the deity of Lord Chaitanya. Prabhupada was wearing a gold wool cap, a peach-colored turtleneck jersey, and an effulgent silk saffron dhoti and kurta. Around his shoulders, he wore a white silk chadar, and he wore a garland of orchids and many yellow flowers. It was winter in Melbourne and quite cold, but he put his hands up and chanted and danced. We had about 11 new mridangams. There were also 3 men playing big bass drums, and we all formed a circle around Srila Prabhupada. It was ecstatic. All playing drums, chanting Hare Krishna, and Prabhupada himself chanting in the parade. Going on through the city, Prabhupada marched with transcendental power, just taking over the city, walking right down Swanson Street. Sabhapati. From the point of view of weather, it wasn't a very nice day. Prabhupada met the Rath cart at the corner of Swanson Street and Burke Street, and he led from there on. He walked about 2 miles. All the devotees had been having kirtan in 3 different groups. But when Prabhupada met the Rath Yatra procession, we all gathered around him. He was leading the procession. Behind him was a 14-feet murti of Lord Chaitanya, followed by 3 Rath carts. Every now and again in the procession, Prabhupada would stop and turn around and stare up at Lord Chaitanya. He would simply stand and look up at Lord Chaitanya for a minute or 2, and then he would turn around again and lead the procession. It was such an ecstatic experience that one gets the feeling that Prabhupada had conquered Melbourne and Australia. Gaurgopal. I was sitting right next to Prabhupada through the whole ceremony, playing the drum. Oh, I'm not sitting, I'm sorry. I was right next to Prabhupada through the whole ceremony, playing the drum. He particularly liked to sing one tune through the whole time. He puts his hands up in the air. He was dancing. Vaikuntanath. The Rath Yatra parade was going and Prabhupada was walking. And at one point, he asked me, get me some water. I became panic-stricken because there was nowhere to get water. So I just depended on Krishna and ran over to a house as fast as I could and asked the people for some water. They gave it, and I ran back to Srila Prabhupada. When I was getting that water, though, there was this big rainbow out, and it had actually begun to rain a little bit. It was a very vivid rainbow, and at the end of the rainbow came right down on top of the huge building where the Rath Yatra ended. So it would be some divine message there. Hari, sorry, there is a huge place, the exhibition buildings, and we had rented one section of it, where the roof was about 80 feet high. So the Rath Yatra carts were taken in with the tops lowered, and then the tops were put up again inside the hall. So tops lowered means the canopy, it had some mechanical system, we could lower it or raise it up. So when the tops were put up again inside the hall, all 3 Rath carts were brought in and tops were pulled up. Then Srila Prabhupada came in and everyone was seated. About 1,000 people were there. Srila Prabhupada sat up on the Vyasasana on the Rath cart itself and gave a lecture from there. Sabhapati. Although it was a cold and rather nasty day, there were 1,000 people in that exhibition building. Prabhupada's lecture was brief. He thanked everyone for coming along and joining in the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He told everyone he was very appreciative of how they had come to see Lord Jagannath and how they were taking part. He said that actually all these activities of singing and dancing were due to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The Melbourne newspapers duly reported the Rath Yatra, a day for cymbals and chants. Chariots topped the song. One newspaper reported, "Don't let Krishna alarm you." Cleric. The sight of the Hare Krishna youth in Melbourne streets should not alarm Australians or cause them to mock. The Reverend Gordon Powell said in Scott's church yesterday. He said the sect could be a sign of the swing of the pendulum back to spiritual values and traditional virtues on the part of a modern youth. The article praised the devotees' reaction against extreme materialism and reported the events of the Rath Yatra parade. Reverend Powell, head bishop of the Anglican Church in Melbourne, had paid Srila Prabhupada a visit, and this had resulted in the bishop's Sunday sermon comment that Hare Krishnas were not alarming. Srila Prabhupada took the bishop's comments as very significant. So even the bishop, he was well-wisher now at the moment, because he had met Prabhupada, understood the philosophy, understood what he's trying to convey. But another thing to notice is Reverend Powell, head bishop of the Anglican Church in Melbourne. Now, in Christianity, there's so many denominations. No, I don't think we all would even come to know how many denominations or how many sects are there. It's not just Catholics and Baptists. There's so many, like this Anglican Church. It might be having its own philosophy, all coming from Jesus Christ. There's nothing against. But they all pick up some part of instructions of Jesus Christ, and then they just dwell upon it, and then they say, this is the right philosophy, this is what we're going to follow. And then they have some followers. And in Australia, in America also, and in the other Christian countries, they just allow. You can build your own church and you can follow your own philosophy, no problem. Yes, Catholics are the main group, but there's so many sections. And another thing about Christianity, if you go to one church, say this Anglican church, you cannot go to another church. You're not welcome there. It's not like in Hinduism, we can go to Krishna temple, we can go to Shiva temple, we can go to Gurdwara also. Nobody's going to bother. But in those churches, you just cannot go. You're not allowed. And in fact, I have a Christian friend here she's in Gurgaon. She and her husband live in not Gurgaon, Dwarka. So met them in Gurgaon. So I was just asking about some details about Christianity. And she told me they're from Kerala, but they lived all their life in Delhi, born, brought up in Delhi. So in Kerala, her parents or her grandparents from the village, they used to go to one particular denomination of the church. I don't know the names because they're very confusing to me. So now her parents moved to Delhi from Kerala. Now they could not go to any church because they belonged to that particular denomination. They could not go until one church was opened in this area, now where they could go. For so many years, they could not go. And then there was another problem. I didn't know all this. I guess this is in India only, this kind of fanaticism. I don't think this kind of fanatic beliefs are there in US. What she told me was, if she had gone to another church And not and forget about if she had married a person of another religion like Hindu or somebody else. Then the threat was back home in the village, they'll be completely ostracized. It means completely get out of the society, kind of fatwa, you can say. And they will not even get a place to bury the their dead bodies once they die. So they're so strict, so fanatic. And they call Sanatan Dharmis as fanatics. Here we can go to any temple. Nobody is going to stop, nobody is going to ask any questions. Any temple we can go to. Any Gurdwara, even churches we can go to. Nobody is going to bother. This is it. In America, now in America, I mean, there's one thing that is happening. Like blacks and whites, they go to separate churches. They don't mingle. Maybe now it is happening, they're opening up, but mostly they go to separate churches. Blacks have their own church, their own way of worshipping, their own way of singing whatever bhajans or songs in praise of the Lord, and whites have their own way. Why? So on Sundays, Sunday is the day when they all go to church. So you can definitely see the segregation, the separation. Blacks going to one church, whites going to one church. And if people say from Japan or from some other country, Christians, if they move to America, then they will have their own separate church. So, nobody talks about all this. This is very wrong. God is one. Anybody should be able to go to any church, but not in their culture. I mean, same thing about Islam also. Sunnis don't go to Shias mosque, or Ahmadiyas don't go there. They have their own mosque. And then there is differences between Barelvi and Bebandis. So many differences. Only in Hinduism, we can go to any temple, anywhere, no problem. During his week's stay in Melbourne, Prabhupada attended a large program at the town hall where he inspired a long and ecstatic kirtan with 1,000 people dancing in a circle before the deity of Lord Chaitanya. He also visited St. Pascal's teaching college, a Franciscan seminary, and was very well received by the monks there. The seminarians asked intelligent philosophical questions, one of them inquiring about what Prabhupada thought of the founder, Saint Francis of Assisi. The seminarian described briefly how St. Francis saw everything in the universe in relation to God and addressed nature's creations as brother tree, brother bird, and so on. St. Francis' attitude, Prabhupada replied, was first-class God consciousness. Yes, the St. Francis of Assisi, he is very famous. One thing that he said was, and it's very, very wonderful quote. I have to remember the exact words. The exact words, I'll try to post it in the group. A wonderful quote. I mean, amazing consciousness he had. That same evening in his room, Prabhupada met with the Vicar General of the Roman Catholic Church in Australia, Reverend J.A. Kelly. Prabhupada played a recording of his morning's lecture at St. Pascal's And afterward, the Reverend asked if Prabhupada would pose with him for a picture to be printed in the religious periodical. Again, the newspapers picked it up. Swami spreads unity message. The normally serene cloisters of the Roman Catholic Yara Theological Union echoed to the chants of Hare Krishna yesterday. It doesn't matter what religion you belong to, as long as you love and serve God, said His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So this was Prabhupada's unity message for everybody. Doesn't matter what religion you belong to, as long as you love and serve God. You must be delivered from the disease of materialism, or else they will always be warned. After the discussion, the president of the Institute's Student Representative Council, Franciscan seminarian Patrick McClure, 25, said that there seemed to be a consensus in many areas. In particular, we agree with the need to reject materialism, he said. Mr. McClure said the informal meeting reflected an openness and tolerance in the church. Maybe they have something to tell us, he said. So, wonderful visits to different churches and different leaders. Prabhupada is meeting, having different discussions. Okay, we can stop here. See anybody has any questions or comments. Yeah, that Saint Francis of Assisi. I remember, he said that you should preach every day, whole day, every day. And when required, speak a little. Means one should preach by his behavior also.
Nice, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Manta. It's okay. You all have safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada.